Did you know the creation of the teddy bear was inspired by a cartoon in the Washington Post poking fun at the fact that Theodore Roosevelt refused to shoot a bear tied to a tree on a hunting trip? I've also never shot a bear tied to a tree. When do Kaelan bears hit the shelves? Why would Ulysses keep the S if it was a mistake and didn't stand for nothing? I wonder how many other presidents have fake middle initials just trying to sound cool like President Grant. Welcome to A Brief History of the Past. I'm Kaelan Bros, and this is part 3 of the history of the Presidents of the United States. I hope things get more interesting this time around. My tolerance for talking about the deeds of old white men is wearing thin. At least the monarchs had some ladies in the mix. Oh, were any of the presidents cross-dressers?
Oh, indubitably, sir.
This time we're starting off with the 31st President of the United States, Herbert Hoover, who was in office from 1929 to 1933. While Hoover would have some success holding government positions under other presidents, his own term was not seen as a good one due to the stock market crash of 1929, resulting in the Great Depression. That's a weird name, isn't it? How was the Depression? It was great.
Most illogical reaction.
The stock market crashed in October of 1929, resulting in years of unemployment, poverty, deflation, and a loss of confidence in the country's economic future. What marred Hoover's time in office was his seeming lack of initiative to combat the crisis. This resulted in his decisive defeat by Democrat Franklin D Roosevelt in the 1932 election. Again with the middle initial? Yeah, I bet it stands for Democrat. Franklin Democrat Roosevelt. What? Delano. Look, if you don't know it, you don't have to make something up. Delano. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR as he was often called, served as the 32nd president from 1933 until his death in 1945. Wait, that's longer than 8 years. How many terms did he serve? He was elected 4 times, but died only 3 months into his last term. Wait, so when was the term limit established then? 1951? Well, so all presidents who served 2 terms beforehand just opted out after? Well, being president must have been rubbish if you wanted to quit after just 8 years.
Free!
FDR was the 5th cousin of the 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, and Franklin's wife was Theodore's niece. So, that would make her his 5th cousin once removed? But you know what though, I want 5th cousins, right? That's like practically being step cousins. But, you know, gross.
I don't know what it is, but when I kiss you, it's like I'm kissing my brother.
FDR would see the country through its economic crisis with his New Deal, which was a series of programs, financial reforms and regulations put in place to provide relief and recovery from the obnoxious depression. What? No, I refuse to lift it up by calling it great. That's right, I'm depression shaming.
I'm going to allow it.
FDR would also see the nation through World War II. He would attempt to keep the United States out of the war, while still providing diplomatic and financial support for China, the United Kingdom, and eventually the Soviet Union. But all that changed on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. FDR called it a date which would live in infamy, and got a congressional declaration of war against Japan, along with one against Germany and Italy just days later. Didn't I say in the last video that Hawaii was the best addition to the Union? Right, the United States would have just stayed out of it, but no. They had to go and attack the best state ever. What a bunch of knobs. FDR would start development on the atomic bomb, which would also be used in retaliation against Japan. But he also worked with other Allied leaders to lay the groundwork for the United Nations. Which finally allowed linguists to put their degrees to good use, eh? Aries Truman was FDR's vice president and would succeed him as the 33rd president, serving from 1945 to 1953. And there it is again. That middle initial, right? Unless there was another Aries Truman that was president, it's not needed. You know what? From now on, when I start seeing those, I'm just going to make up what the name means. Aries Stefan Truman. Got a nice ring to it, don't you think?
Of course!
World War II would come to an end in the months after FDR's death, but that didn't make things any easier for Truman. He would have to handle the start of the Cold War, and he would gain United Nations approval to intervene when North Korea invaded South Korea in what would be known as the Korean War. That's not a terribly original name, is it? I mean, North versus South sounds to me like the American Civil War all over again. So what about Civil War II, Korean Boogaloo? Yeah? What? What do you mean they're two separate countries? While in office, Truman's domestic policies would face opposition in Congress, but he would guide the economy through post-war challenges. He also submitted comprehensive civil rights legislation, issuing Executive Order 9981. He wiped out the Jedi? What? It was to start racial integration into the military and federal agencies? Well, that still don't make it okay for him to murder Jedi.
You rebel scum.
Dwart Donatello Eisenhower was the 34th president from 1953 to 1961. What? Dwight was his middle name? Wait, so his name was Dwight Eisenhower? His first name was David? Look, you can't go switching your names about all willy-nilly. I don't care if you are president. You don't see me going by Elizabeth K. Burroughs. Eisenhower's national security policy was called the New Look and was intended to balance the Cold War military commitment with the nation's financial resources by reducing the cost of nuclear weapons and the funding of expensive military divisions. After the Soviets launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, Eisenhower would also authorize the establishment of NASA, which in turn started the space race. Oi, do you think we should tell them that we already did a video on the history of space travel covering all that? Yeah, you're right. That'd be a bit tacky. Eisenhower would also sign the Civil Rights Act of 1957 to provide federal protection for African American voting rights. Unfortunately, opponents of the act were able to strip away certain provisions, limiting its effectiveness. Near the end of his time in office, Eisenhower also approved the Bay of Pigs invasion, but that was left to his successor to handle. You know, I really think we should tell him that we also made a video on the history of the Bay of Pigs. Alright, you're the boss. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the 35th president from 1961 to 1963. What's that? What? His middle name actually is Fitzgerald. Well, bollocks. Kennedy was a Democrat in office at the height of the Cold War. As a result, most of his presidential efforts went to dealing with the Soviet Union and Cuba, who would authorize the Cuban Project in November of 1961, a covert CIA operation against Fidel Castro's government, also known as Operation Mongoose. Who names these operations? Alright men, the Cuban Project is a go. Is that what we're calling it? Aren't you worried that will clue people into what we're doing? Alright, you're so smart, what would you call it then? Operation, Ricky Tikki Tavi, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Ricky Tikki Tavi. Yeah, my kid's been reading a book for school. It's about a mongoose that battles a snake. Well, Castro is a snake in my book, but yours is a bit wordy. So let's call it Operation Mongoose Battles Snake. In 1962, US spy planes discovered Soviet missile bases had been deployed in Cuba, and this almost resulted in thermonuclear war on a global scale. Known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK would reach an agreement with Soviet Premier Khrushchev after some tense negotiations. The public terms of the agreement would see the Soviets dismantle their weapons in Cuba and return them to the Soviet Union, while the Americans would agree to avoid invading Cuba again. Oh, I like that wording. As part of the agreement with the Soviets, the United States declares that we agree to avoid invading Cuba unless it becomes unavoidable. Or should we really, really want to? JFK would be assassinated on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas by Lee Harvey Oswald. While a special commission concluded that Oswald acted alone in the assassination, there are still many who believe Kennedy was killed as part of a conspiracy with multiple people involved. Oh, I don't want to end on conspiracy stuff with Kennedy. What about his ties to organised crime? What? That's also unsubstantiated. Alright, what about all his extramarital affairs then? Didn't he shag Marilyn Monroe?
By the way, this young lady is not my wife, but I am sleeping with her.
I'm telling you this because I'm comfortable with my womanizing.
Lyndon B Johnson was Kennedy's vice president and would succeed him as the 36th president, serving from 1963 to 1969. Lyndon Bartholomew Johnson had a strong start to his presidency, expanding civil rights, Medicare and Medicaid, urban development, aid to education and the arts, and declaring war on poverty. Wait, he sent an army to attack poor people?
I don't think it means what you think it means.
The war on poverty was legislation put in place by Johnson to apply government funding to eliminate poverty and improve living conditions for low-income neighbourhoods. I wouldn't call that a war. It don't sound like any guns were involved.
To survive a war, you gotta become war.
Unfortunately for Johnson, the involvement in the Vietnam War, rioting in major cities, and an increased crime rate greatly diminished his approval rating by the end of his office. Well, no wonder the Vietnam War was a disaster. You heard how he attacked poverty. Richard Nixon was the 37th president, serving from 1969 to 1974. During his time in office, he would end America's involvement in the Vietnam War and end the military draft the same year. He would also establish diplomatic relations with China in 1972, established the Environmental Protection Agency, presided over the Apollo 11 moon landing, and began the war on cancer. Must have been worse than Johnson's war on poverty, because last time I checked, cancer is kicking our ass. Nixon is the only president to have resigned from office after the Watergate Scandal would have surely seen him impeached and removed from office by trial in the Senate. The scandal was the result of the Nixon administration's continued attempts to cover up involvement in a failed break-in of the DNC headquarters at the Watergate office building in DC. 69 people were indicted, with 48 being convicted. Well, I don't remember hearing about Nixon going to jail. What's that? He was pardoned by the next president.
It's good to be the king.
Quick question. Will there be any point in the future where we're not talking about presidents? Be sure to check out our next episode, part 4 of our history of the US presidents, starting off with Gerald Ford. Wasn't his wife a boozer? Let me know your thoughts on Presidents 31 through 37 and what sort of history topics you'd like to see me discuss in future videos in the comments below. Thanks, and I'll see you all in the future. While in office, Truman's domestic policies would face opposition in Congress, but he would guide the economy through post-war challenges. He also submitted comprehensive civil rights legislation, issuing Executive Order 9981. I don't like how sloppy that was. It sounded wet. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon to be notified when more brief history of the past videos go up. And check out some of the other videos we have on the channel. You might find something else that you like.